Are we going to be in a position where the Prime Minister needs to make a big decision about conscription?
Now you're getting onto a really tricky one. The only way we maintain peace in Europe, for our generation, for my grandchildren's generation and your children's, is through effective military deterrence. Nobody wants a war. We've got to do everything we can to avoid a shooting war. We see what a shooting war is doing to Ukraine for the last 4 years. And let's be clear, if Russia succeeds in Ukraine, they will try it on in the Baltic states. And if that happens, we're at war. The only way we deter that is through effective military deterrence. And that means we've got to demonstrate to the Russians that we are ready for anything they want to throw at us. And this is a regime defined by war. Putin came in as president in 1999 on the back of arguably engineering the destruction of the blowing up of apartment blocks by so-called Chechen rebels, probably done by the FSB. Chechnya, Syria, Georgia, Ukraine, Crimea, and now Ukraine. And he's got to continue the forward movement. And you then say, okay, if we need effective deterrence, what does that mean? It means we've got to be ready for war in every respect, rather as we were in the Cold War. Life went on in the Cold War, of course it did, and we flourished and had peace, but we had a military that was strong. We had home defense that had been thought through, civil defense, we had et cetera, et cetera. We've got nothing like that. The British Army, Air Force, Navy, as you saw, HMS Dragon has finally got to Gibraltar 2 weeks later. In 1982, with the Falklands, the Navy got 140 ships out of the door within 4 or 5 days. That's how things have gone. The British Army is a shadow. The soldiers, don't get me wrong, the quality of the soldiers, the quality of the leadership is second to none. And I'm sure it's much, much better than it was in my day. Brilliant guys and girls. But do they have the kit? Do they have the sustainability? Have they got the endurance? The answer is no. The spares, kit, bullets, bombs, all the stuff. Manpower. Army have meant to be pegged at 70,000, but they can't. They're having struggling to attract recruits for that. So I have said on a pretty frequent basis that I think we have to think the unthinkable. Now I know this is anathema to any professional soldier, and nobody wants conscription. But when you look at the way the Finns do it, a population of just under 6 million, they can get 280,000 soldiers out of the door at short readiness because they have universal male conscription, and everybody who serves for whatever it is, 9 months or a year, depending on whether you become an NCO or not, or an officer, has a reserve liability. So you can get 280,000 soldiers ready to fight. The Finns could deploy 200 of the latest variant of Leopard 2 tank at short notice. British Army couldn't begin to do that. You look at the way the Norwegians do it. They don't have universal conscription, but what they say is the Minister of Defence issues an annual quota, say we need 10,000 school leavers for a year. They start with asking for volunteers, and people volunteer because they know that if they do conscription, firstly, they've got to have been selected. So the MOD, the Army and Navy and Air Force, will take the very best school leavers. Everybody registered, they'll look at their school reports and say, well, I want him, her, and her, because they're the best. So they do their year's conscription. They then go on to university after that. And when they leave university and look for jobs, because they've got, I did conscription on my CV, that's a badge of honor. Employers say, well, I want you did conscription, you must be better than him or her, because he or she didn't do conscription. Yeah. So you see what I mean? I think the natural British default setting, conscription, it's hairy battle dress, peeling spuds in some Nissan hut in Catterick in a freezing wind. We've got to be more intelligent than that. So I think we've got to think about it. Now, the flip side of that is that we don't need the same sort of mass. I'm not sure. Warfare is bloody and it's expensive, and the Ukrainians are facing chronic shortages of manpower. But it's also true to say that with the sort of weapons and technology that characterize warfare today, you can be more economical with your manpower. Use of robots, use of drones. You're moving into a different world, but it's also a world where there is still a requirement for legacy equipment, guns, tanks, ships, planes, etc. At the end of the day, it is a political decision, and it's going to need political leadership and boldness. But it's got to come as well from a recognition, certainly in the military context. We have a need. We have an urgent need. And what we have is political leadership that stands up at the Munich Security Conference and says, we've got to put more money into defense. Okay? Where does it? Actually, every time there's the slightest hint of money being diverted from disability benefit to defense, there are screams of horror from backbenchers, and the government does a U-turn and backs off. So we are the laggards here. Britain used to be the pace setter in NATO in Europe. We're no longer. Our neighbor, our allies will have been looking at what happened with HMS Dragon and thinking, oh my God, what has happened to the British military? And this is the problem that Prime Minister Starmer faces. Yeah, he's, I'm sure, saying and doing the right thing by saying to the Americans, no, we're not going to join this war of choice. It has not been authorized by the UN. This is not NATO Article 5. And we don't trust you and your strategic thinking because you haven't got a strategy and you haven't thought through so he's fair right there. But where he stands on really thin ice is the fact that,
when you find something that just fits right into your routine and you think, why was I not doing this sooner? Well, that's how I felt when I first came across the Bond Charge infrared sauna blanket. Now, if you follow me on my socials, I'm a pretty big fan of saunas. But I also know that sometimes they're just not the most accessible things. I mean, I travel a lot, for example. The infrared sauna blanket, though, well, for me, it solves that problem. I mean, it heats up in under a minute. It can be used on your sofa or wherever you relax. You can take it with you if you're traveling. I love the fact that it uses an infrared heat to target your body directly. So there's no sweating buckets. There's no discomfort. It's this lovely sort of smooth, effective way to burn calories, to detox, to relax. And Bond Charge have built a loyal following of over 250,000 happy customers, including me. And when you're talking about something that gets those kinds of results, I think it's important to listen. So if you're looking for a way to make your recovery easier, a bit less of a chore, then maybe check out Bond Charge. Head to bondcharge.com and use the code HP15 to save 15%. That's the code HP15 for 15% off at bondcharge.com. Trust me, it's worth a look.
Where he stands on really thin ice is the fact that the Americans and every other NATO ally knows that the British Armed Forces are not, I just don't have the oomph, the strength, the power. If he had strong and capable armed forces, as Maggie Thatcher did in 1990 when Iraq invaded Kuwait, she was able to deploy, and then John Major took over. We deployed really strong armed forces to the Gulf. We put into the desert a strong armored division, which I was a junior commander in it. And I remember meeting the American Corps commander when I was working for General Guthrie after the war. And we went to America and he was meeting the guy who commanded and he said the British were absolutely, that first armored division was relentless. We were setting the pace in a way which the American divisions couldn't keep up with because we had such capability. That's all gone.
Can we make people feel optimistic about the world at the moment?
Absolutely, we can be optimistic because we've got people, we've got the capabilities, we've got the genius of, you've just got to look around, the creativity and ideas and genius of British society, whether it's arts, whether it's media, whether it's sport, whether it's technology. And you've only got to look, just in a military context, some of the creativity and ideas going into tech startups that are producing some absolutely world-class systems, military systems. It's all there. It just needs bold political leadership. So I think we, as a population, need to be making it 100% clear to our leaders that we expect bold decisions. We need to be given clear direction to meet the challenges, and we can meet those challenges. I've no doubt about it. But we've just got to force our leaders to lead properly.